I'm Shane White, and this is The Process.
Hey gang, Shane Patrick White here with another edition of The Process. On today's Speedball Challenge, we're going to use the mapping and cartography nibs. I have some of these nibs already, and I've used some of them before. They're really interesting. I didn't know there was something so specific for map making, but apparently there is. And if you're into Dungeons and Dragons, or any number of role-playing games, these might be fun nibs to work with. So I'm going to do a little bit of a test for you guys, a little example. I've got a drawing of, or sketch rather, of Dr. Strange. I thought the idea of Dr. Strange in a strange land was kind of an interesting thing. So why not give that a go? If you've seen any of the other videos in this 5-video series, you know I'll end up soaking these nibs in some distilled white vinegar. But I'm not going to soak them as long as I did the last time. I think maybe 15 minutes while it's good. Some people soak them for overnights, but I might just soak them for a couple of minutes just to kind of get the manufacturing residue off to make these usable. Take a little bit to open up, don't they? Yeah, careful with the blades. The idea of the Speedball Challenge is that I was given a bunch of products by Speedball themselves, Speedball Art, and I wanted to, not having used some of them, I wanted to open them up and use them in real time. So, like before, you get some nice guidelines to using their product, get a couple pen nib holders, and you get some cool nibs. So the first one, let's see, I'm going to use my signs here. This is a, what is it? I believe that's a Hunt 99. That's going to go in the white vinegar. This is a Hunt Artist Pen round pointed, and this is a 100. I don't remember using something like that. But we'll see. What's this? This is also, this is a 103. No, it's an 03 mapping. It's a mapping nib, Hunt mapping. It's got a little cross, which is kind of neat. Makes it feel very esoteric. What's in here? Oh, look at this. An even smaller one. Gosh, these are really small. Makes me wonder if I need a different holder. This is a Hunt. Barely can read this. Hunt Extra Fine, or wow, I can't read it. Finest, a Hunt Finest. And there's a number on there, and I can't read it. I think it's like a 1. Could be a 10. Could be whatever. In you go. All right, now we're getting into the bigger stuff here. I think I've used one of these before. This is a Hunt Extra Fine 512. I think that's the same nib, if I'm not mistaken, that comic book illustrator Walt Simonson has used on his stuff. And here's a 513 Globe. You might have also used this too. I could be just wrong. Okay, so let's roll that around a little bit. So yeah, I just made up a bunch of stuff. Like, I've never made a map. I've never actually drawn a map, so this is going to be kind of fun and interesting. Let's Let's take these nibs out real quick so we can get started on this. I'm hoping it's going to feel more like the sketching, drawing stuff rather than the lettering, which I'm going to try lettering with some of the larger nibs. Okay, a bit of that. So as you can see, I barely soaked these. In the last video, I think I soaked them for a good 5 to 10 minutes. And they turned darker. The metal actually got a little bit darker. Because, you know, to be honest, white vinegar it's a mild acid. That's why people used to clean with it back in the day. I remember my grandmother used to use vinegar and old newspapers to wash her windows. You can believe that. So let's get these sort of laid out as such. I think the last time I went from largest to smallest. Still might do that for this. We'll see. Kind of goes with the idea that we work biggest to smallest, big shapes down to the details. So I'm going to try use the globe, the Hunt globe. Now I'm using trusty old Speedball Superblack ink because that works best for me, and it has for a number of years. I have a setup in this janky little marker top, mainly because the smaller the opening, the more chances the flow of your ink will last longer. But actually, add more here. So let's start off with just lettering. I'm curious. I've been in a lettering mood lately. It's kind of nice. I think in the first video I showed you how to create profiles for your nibs. I would recommend doing that for all the nibs. That way you can see what those characteristics are and you can pull them out at a moment's notice. Kind of screwed that up. Probably should have blotted this. Now, fair warning, I'm not a professional letterer by any stretch. I've done it, and maybe under different conditions I can do it better, but under these conditions, this is what you get. You probably want to blot your pens a little more frequently than I do. The substrate I'm using is a 34-pound Hammermill paper. It's for printing in color, so it's a little stronger than typical paper. This is terrible. This is like the worst. Now you hear what the voices are in my head. Because I really want to take this out for a spin. I'm going to start with a sketch first because that's interesting to me. I think I'll feel more comfortable diving into it like this. So the thing about this nib is I could probably do circles without any worry that it would be catching on the paper itself. But because it's so long, you really have a lot more real estate to deal with to get the control that you might normally get from a Hunt 102 or 107. There, that's me just pushing it down. You can get some good range with this. I've been doing inking videos for a few years now. And while I mostly ink my own work professionally, I have inked a few other people's work, but I do not consider myself a professional inker. I'm not somebody who's got that skill down where I'm focusing just on the essentials of inking. I do it enough to get by. That way I can finish a piece of art and not feel beholden to somebody else. I think that's why I originally took up inking. I had a roommate in college who wanted to be an inker. I don't know if he thought it was like an inroad for him to get into making comics for a living, but he got pretty good at it. Did it for a number of years. He was inking me along the way, and we were both kind of learning together. So at some point, I got tired of only having one option to have my work look finished. So I went back to my roots, which started with using crow quills and Speedball ink, and picked up a brush and kept at it. It took about 8 years before I was good enough to consider it professional. And subsequently, I started getting work. This is awesome. I put my hand right in it. There's a great example of a mistake. Okay, no big deal. This is a sketch. We're trying things out. What was I saying? Oh, I started doing freelance for RPGs. Speaking of Dungeons and Dragons, this would have been a valuable nib set if I were a dungeon master, but I was not the leader type back in the day. I had several friends who were much better at it than I was. More organized, let's put it that way. Wow, I really like this name. It's kind of fun. And it didn't take a lot of soaking in the distilled white vinegar to get it to have the adherence of the ink. So that's good. So that overnight thing might just be a fallacy. Now, I did use a little bit of reference for Doctor Strange, kind of like the Benedict Cumberbatch approach to that character, but I also like interpretations by guys like Michael Golden, who I think did my favorite version of the character. A lot of people really like Steve Ditko, but it's taken me a while to warm up to his style. I'm a fan of strong draftsmanship, and if you're familiar with Ditko's work, it's more symbolic than anything. And that's something I think I had to learn over time to appreciate. I would consider this nib a pretty stout nib. It feels really solid in its usage. I feel like I can really push down on it, and it's not going to break. It's not going to get destroyed. Some of the nibs, if they're too soft and you push down on them, the tines that come together to release the ink will spread over time. There's the nibs are made of different metals. You know, some I think are brass, others are steel. But there's a different quality to them, and so you have to know what those qualities are and how to best get what you want out of them. So I've mainly used one nib for this entire piece. Let's get some big shapes locked in, then I'll switch nibs. Try not to screw this up. That's what's nice. If you can find a cheap, good paper to test out inking on, I think you will feel less pressure. I know I do. It's mainly because I grew up in a sort of lower middle class, sometimes poor, sometimes not so poor environment. And so paper in general seems to be a very precious commodity to me for some reason. So by holding further back on the holder, get a nice look. Wow, it's kind of fun. If you ever have a chance to see Dennis Cowan's work, his application of ink is really cool. It's got a great sketchy quality to it. He's done characters like Question. That's the only one that comes to mind because it was so impactful back in the day. Okay, I want to switch nibs just because I am curious what to expect. Okay, so that was a Hunt 513 globe. Kind of burly. We're going to go with a Hunt Extra Fine 512. Yeah, 512. It's not much different than what I was just using, but I'm sure it's different somehow. Let's see. Okay, it's going to be finer points. Nice finer detail. Now, this is fun, and it's got a little more spring to it. It's not as stout as the previous one. Again, this is a sketch. It's not like it's going to be too precious. Almost reminds me a little bit of Barry Windsor Smith. If you ever get a chance to look at his line work, I think he also uses Crow Quill. Or did. I don't know what he does these days. But if you ever get a chance to look at his old comic book work from the 80s, like Machine Man, limited series, it's fantastic. Literally any comic he did, Daredevil, X-Men, you name it, it was always a joy because he also colored his own work and he really elevated the quality of coloring in comics because he did all the call outs and separations himself. My favorite stuff is when he actually inked or illustrated snow. It just had a really neat look to it. I wonder if I could do Barry Windsor Smith style. Let's really study it. I don't think it'd be too hard to break down and interpret. Now, like when I'm doing shadows like this, I'm squinting to see how that shadow blends and how it looks. This nib, actually, I like this a little bit more than the last one. It just feels nice. I haven't really pushed down hard on it though. Now I am. Look at that. That's great. It's just super responsive. That's really fun. Okay. Don't want to spend too much time on this piece. Well, I do, but I really should get going. Should show you some level of cartography or map making. And I just want to noodle this. I think that's the thing about sketching is, you know, if you're having fun, that's where you want to be. Okay, I just want to convince you that this is Dr. Strange. Dr. Stephen Strange. You can hear it, you can hear that scraping sound. It's glorious, isn't it? Wow, lots of fun, loads of fun. I want to do these little speck things, but you know what? I'm not going to. I'm going to exercise some level of control. I think because it's a smaller, more flexible nib, I'm gonna go in here and do the outline. What I might do is I might revisit the sketch here and there as I go. But before I go all the way around, I want to see if I can letter with this a little bit. There's a thing called doubling up, and I'm going to try that here because it's got a neat esoteric look to it, which basically means you're doubling up the downstrokes. I know I've said esoteric twice, but it's a word that fits. That's kind of fun. Again, I'm not a professional map maker. If I worked for Google, I would probably be fired. I think the thing about maps that I've always liked is when you open a book and they have a map of the world that the story is taking place in. And that to me really grounds everything and cements what's going to happen next. And you can picture it in your head as the character's quest and journey to overcome whatever odds they need to get to the object of desire, to overcome the challenges that they've been thrust into. So there is reason enough to have skill as a good map maker. Now these last two nibs have sort of a rounded tip, and that's what makes them better for lettering than the 5 other points. Or, sorry, 3, 4 other points, which tend to be more pointy. And those I'll use for textures and the like. Okay, so that's some quick lettering there. Let's do Coastline. When researching map making online, I didn't find anything that was modern and interesting looking to me. So I feel like this is a field that could really be explored further. So it's wide open. That's kind of cool. Feels good. Now I want to play Dungeons and Dragons, or making a map for my novel. I actually made a map for my graphic novel that I am prepping at the moment. It was one of the first things that I wanted to do. It gave me a sense of how everything was laid out, how the battles would take place and where they would take place, and why it was so important to have this one landmass be a certain way. When I was first living on my own here in Seattle, I had an apartment, and the guy who was kind of the caretaker, landlord, as it were, was a guy about my age who was a painter. And he did paintings that were really interesting. He was using his thumbprints blown up into really large scale to represent the topology of where he came from. So on two different levels, he was examining the idea of place and purpose and origins. So he would blend his thumbprints with topology maps and use the same kind of markings. I thought that was pretty cool. I think I lived there about maybe a year. I was dating my wife, who lived not too far away from me. And we eventually bought a house together. I guess we thought this might work out. So far, so good. All right, so that's kind of cool. It's got a nice little feel to it. So since I'm going to be doing lines that are travel lines, and they're going to go in a lot of different directions, I think I'm just going to keep this pen, do them. Here's one that's going to be dotted. Don't know why. Maybe it's not a main. Maybe it's a path. A series of paths. It's not a main drag. Looks like a little point to indicate center. Okay, and we got this order. What do we call it? Can't remember what it's called. I'll figure it out. The navigation point. Okay, so now let's go down to the next smaller size. It's probably going to be this nib in this folder. 199. I think we've used this before. This is a kind of a weird nib because it's rather shallow. It sits rather shallow in the thing. So let's have a look. Oh yeah, super soft. It almost feels like a brush. So I'm going to use that to create texture for the water. I think with maps, it's about clarity, it's about interest. You want to make sure the water feels like water. The land markings are clearly labeled, and that there's some kind of rhythm that attracts the eye, whether it's line work or color. You want some kind of consistency. Because you have to think about this. Map makers were basically people you had to trust to know what they were talking about. Because once you got out onto the ocean, all you had were the stars to guide you by. And sure, you could find direction, but there was a lot of unknown territories back in the time. So I think the map maker probably had to be very skilled, had to be a well-trusted person. And boy, I would hate to think someone who screws up a map and then has to answer for it. And it also marked territories too. Territories of rule, boundaries, borders, things that people fought over as they grabbed more land and power. Eventually they became works of art that people collected. Well, mountains. Happy little mountains. Because this nib sits so shallow in the holder, you don't get as much ink in there, and it's you have to dip quite a bit, especially if you're pushing down as much as I am. But you can see the line qualities. It's really grand. Do this all day. Wait, I am doing this all day. Right on. Now I don't have to pull this nib directly across. I can go at an angle and it still creates line work. That's not always the case with every nib, so something to keep in mind. I think because of its flexibility, it gives me that option. Okay, not playing around. We're gonna finish this map. Okay, let's go down one more nib. Let's get something a little smaller. I think I'm gonna do whatever the heck this one is. This is the mapping nib. This is the one made of a different metal. Let's see what that's like. Let's throw the ink on here. Ooh. This might have needed to soak a little bit more. As you can see, I've got ink in there. There we go. Let's jump right in. Let's do some mountains. You can already hear it clicking. It means it's grabbing the paper. And I'm trying to go at it at a different angle. It won't let me. This is a very particular move already. So I'm gonna let's do some light watermarks with a lake. It's nice. I think I might use this nib to do the sea monster. Place the sea monster. I think it was, what was it? Aardman Animation did a joke about the map having a sea monster, having to go around it. It's something to do with pirates. I'm sure it was. I just can't remember the name. Look at that. Monsters. Again with the scales. Do you like the scales? Besides, it looks like a legitimate map. I like the fact that Unexplained always had some level of fear or religion around it, or belief system, or legend. I think that's what made things interesting. I don't know if we have that today. I mean, people are still a little bit superstitious about certain things. Now, because I'm upside down and I'm doing water, I need to keep that in mind. Unlike drawing straight lines, this has to still be consistent with these in some fashion. I wouldn't typically do it this way, but for the sake of expediency, and I mean, it kind of works, kind of works. So I lightly was able to create that pattern. This here, let's take care of this. A little bit of lettering. Not easy. It tends to want to stick. And pathway. Get some interior detail. I have to say, as a kit, this is a really well-rounded inking kit. So if you decide you want to pick up some Speedball products or whatever, this isn't the worst one to start with, to be honest. Especially if you're somebody who's a little has more sensitivity to their approach, which is it has several very soft nibs, very interesting nibs that respond well to a light touch. If you're a little more heavy-handed, you might try the sketching kit. I think that's probably a little more apropos of that skill set. It has a little more variety, some softer nibs, some harder nibs. That's coming along okay. Still have to do this legend. I don't really want to though. Why did I draw it? This is a fun nib. I'm surprised. I was not expecting it. Patterns sometimes denote types of land masses, whether it's desert, forest, track, or whatever. That's why I threw it in there. So that it wasn't singular, I'd throw in something a little different at the top. You can hear it scratching. Okay, that's mostly it. I mean, yeah, I can come in here and do some finer detail in sketching. It's kind of fun. That's why I think this is a pretty good starter set along with the sketching set. Definitely gives you some fun things to play around with. Really consistent. Well, mostly consistent. I mean, that last nib kind of, I don't know what happened there. Maybe the vinegar made it too soft. I don't know. Well, at any rate, that'll work. Hopefully you enjoy this. I know I did. Until next time.
As always, thanks for watching. And also, don't forget to subscribe to The Process. And please, if you have more questions, feel free to leave a comment below.